Welcome to the IRS Solution Attorney Show. If you have problems with the IRS, don't focus on the negative, focus on the solutions. With the IRS Solution Attorney, Darrin T. Mish. For over 15 years, he's been helping taxpayers with IRS problems reclaim their lives and their financial stability. Now, here's your host of the IRS Solution Attorney Show, Darrin T. Mish.
Hello, hello, hello. Good morning. This is the IRS Solution Attorney, Darrin T. Mish.
And I'm your co-host, Katrina Madewell. Welcome to the show.
How are you doing today on Hurricane Eve?
You know, it's going to hit the East Coast. It's not going to bother us. We're going to have some wind and some rain, and that's it.
Our illustrious producer, Pat George, just announced that there's a hurricane warning for Orlando. Now, that's getting a little bit close.
But Orlando's way closer to the East Coast than they are the West Coast.
Not when you live in Zephyr Hills. Well, I bet you I only live, 45 or 50 miles from the mouse as the crow flies.
We're only 1 hour away.
I'm not worried about it. Have some water and some food and a hurricane party.
Yeah, she doesn't worry. You know, she likes to sell homes.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, if
Listen,
the big
Pat,
bad wolf comes and huffs and puffs and blows away your house, she'd just sell you a new home.
I'll tell you, just like I tell my husband, there's nothing stressful in my job about anybody being homeless. Don't worry. It's nothing stressful about that at all. Right, Darrin?
Well, if you say so.
You would know. You lived in your camper.
I did. What she's talking about is for when we were between houses for over 5 months, we lived in our RV, in an RV park here in Florida. And at first we kind of were a little bit, I don't know, we didn't know what to expect, and we kind of felt like it might be a strange experience. Other than living with a family of four, 2 kids and 2 parents living in 400 square feet, that was kind of a strange, interesting experience in and of itself. But the people that lived in the RV park that we were staying in were super nice. Yeah,
there's a big difference between an RV park and a trailer park, just saying.
I made some lifelong friends, and really I'm better for that experience.
Do you notice the traffic? Are the snowbirds here yet in Zephyr Hills?
Oh, for sure. Every day, as I'm driving north on I-75 trying to get to 52, you see just like caravans of RVs on I-75 coming south, and they get off to get to Zephyr Hills. They get off at 52 and kind of weave their way through San Antonio and Dade City to get down there.
They might be delayed a week or so, because of Hurricane Matthew.
Yeah, there's probably I bet you there's not a lot coming today, but probably next week, this weekend.
Speaking of living in an RV, I have friends coming from Maine next week. And my wife said, they're going to sleep in all the rooms that we have, so you can sleep in the RV.
So you're getting kicked out of your own house, Pat? Yes. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. I'm going to have to turn that into my man cave.
Well, at least you know where her priorities lie.
We always joked and said that our camper is literally like the doghouse, but my husband's never slept in there. He might not come back if he stayed in there.
We have a pretty good size fifth wheel, and it's in our barn now, so it's covered. And ultimately, the plan is to make that the guest house. Once we have water and sewer and electricity hooked up to it, it's going to be probably nicer than the guest room.
Let me tell you what, I have seen some rock star barns like totally built out. Mm-hmm. Like at one point, some friends of ours, they literally built this barn that had, several horse stalls and like a tack room and all kinds of stuff a barn has. But up above the barn, they made this entire living quarters. Like literally 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, living room, kitchen. It was pretty amazing.
So when I hear the word barn, I don't think of like a place where, you keep horses and hogs and stuff like that. I think of like the ultimate man cave, like Pat was talking about. To me, that's what a barn is. Maybe there's some livestock in there, maybe, but there's got to be some dude space in there, right?
Lots of it.
Dude space. Isn't that the word for a male horse? Isn't it called a dude?
I don't think so, but we'll probably get a caller any day or any moment now telling us what a male horse is called. A stallion, of course.
I have said
intact male horse.
I know exactly what it's called because I was called it many times in high school.
Stallion?
Oh, so think about it.
Yeah, I guess.
Stud.
You know what? I had my friend had this horse named Dude. Maybe that's why I'm thinking that. But I'm totally not the farm person, so I've said that a million times.
By the way, we'd like to welcome you to the farm show this morning.
Well, our outline's a little thin, just for the record. Darrin doesn't always prepare them, and so sometimes when we get here, it's always the first time that I've seen the outline. And sometimes when we look at this, we're like, oh, yeah, we're going to be a little bit off track today.
To segue right into this, however, I heard a story from friends, or it was something in the internet or something I read. But the scariest thing to some people out there is the IRS.
Is that right?
That's what they said.
Not right now. It's the clowns.
The scariest thing to many people is the IRS. And I thought of you immediately.
Fantastic.
I said, not if you know Darrin.
Not if you know Darrin, Team Mish. So today we're going to talk about what do you do if you just forgot to file a tax return, or a lot of them.
You call Darrin Mish at 888-GET-MISH. Is it 888-GET-MISH? It is 888-GET-MISH.
It's 888-GET-MISH or getirshelp.com. But first, before we talk about that, we haven't been live in the studio for about 3 or 4 weeks, and we don't always announce that. But we haven't been here in the studio, which is why we're all a little bit punchy and having a good time here today.
It's all my fault, too.
That and the fact that we're all pretty much know that we're going to wash away tomorrow. But anyway, I wanted to talk about Donald Trump.
Oh, boy. Here we go. Here we go. Okay, we were having this.
Help him out?
We were having this private conversation on the way here. I didn't think Darrin would want to take it to the airwaves, but, you never know.
So I want to talk about Donald Trump. So it is alleged that somebody illegally obtained his 1995 tax return, right? And there's like almost pretty close to $1 billion loss on that. Now, I'm not really up on what the real estate development laws were in 1995 because, quite frankly, I guess I was out of law school, but just barely, and wasn't doing tax work. But my understanding is that a developer back in those days could actually, if he had a failed project, say, and he had borrowed, let's use the number of $1 billion, okay? Let's assume that Donald Trump had $1 million in that deal, and the rest, the other $999 million, was borrowed from banks, okay? If that project failed, the developer got to claim the entire loss, not just the money that he had at risk. That was the law at the time.
That doesn't sound fair. What about your bill, your $1,000 money?
Well, now that we're talking about it, it almost created a disincentive for the guy who had the least amount, the developer, to create the deal, because $1 billion loss is really valuable if you can carry it forward for the 18 years, which was the law at the time. So I'm not saying that
here's the thing, I'm thinking about this from your perspective, Darrin, and if you were representing someone that had $1 billion loss, that's going to be an automatic audit. There's no way that tax return's not getting audited. So going back to the election, he basically said, oh yeah, by the way, I'm signing up for an annual audit. It pretty much happens every year. Yeah,
he says he gets audited all the time, which I think is fairly common at that income level, because if you think about it, if you and I have a 3% discrepancy, big deal, right? I mean, it's not that much money. But if a billionaire has a 3% discrepancy, which would be fairly common, right? Then it's big money. So if I were running the IRS, I don't have a problem with the rich people, by the way, but if I was running the IRS, I would be auditing the bigger taxpayers, because you have to, if you find minor discrepancies, they equal more revenue. That's just my personal philosophy. So he says that he's been under audit for, every year for a lot of years. And then he kind of intimated that it might have been for political purposes. But since he's been both a Democrat and a Republican, I can't hardly see how. But anyway, I don't actually have a problem with the fact that he has this giant loss carry forward that he might have avoided paying taxes for up to 18 years. I don't have a problem with it at all. Congress made the law. He's following the law. What's the problem?
The phone lines may blow up on that one. But, but will you have every single show, you do say, and I'm trying to put it in your exact words, I'm sure I'll mess it up, but you do say, look, the laws are there and you are supposed to take as many allowable deductions as you possibly can that are legal.
Absolutely. And that's what smart, intelligent people do. Now, we could have a philosophical discussion about, is it fair that Warren Buffett's secretary pays more tax than Warren Buffett? I'm not expressing an opinion about that. I think that's inherently unfair. Actually, there's my opinion about it. It's unfair that the secretary pays a higher tax rate than Warren Buffett. But that's what the law is. So if Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton had a giant loss and they were able to carry it forward, that's the law of the land. They would be, I would think, less of them as a possible chief executive if they failed to do that. Now, it's my understanding, too, that Hillary Clinton at one point in time had about a $669 million loss carry forward that she took advantage of. But would you want your president of the United States to not take advantage of that in their personal life?
No.
Otherwise, they're just kind of a sucker, right? I mean, I defy anybody to call the show right now and tell me that they have voluntarily paid more tax than they had to pay.
All right. The phone lines are wide open. This is going to be a fun show. 888-404-1010. 888-404-1010. You're listening to the IRS Solution Attorney Show with Mr. Darrin Mish. I'm your co-host, Katrina Madewell. Pat George back there, always making it fun. He's been a little quiet today. We'll have to change that. We'll be back in just a minute.
Are you suffering from IRS problems? Do you owe back taxes you can't pay? Is your paycheck or bank account being levied? Or maybe you haven't filed tax returns in years and simply don't know what to do. This is Darrin T. Mish to tell you that if you're tired of IRS problems hanging over your head and are ready for a fresh start, we may be able to help. Call the law offices of Darrin T. Mish at 888-GET-MISH, 888-GET-MISH. I can help you file old tax returns, work to release tax liens or stop wage levies, even negotiate deals to pay off back taxes at a discount, sometimes for pennies on the dollar. Hey, let's face it, these days it's not hard to get into tax trouble. A divorce, failed business, health problems, you name it. The point is, IRS problems may be solved if you're willing to take the first step. Call for a free consultation at 888-GET-MISH. That's 888-438-6474. Or go to the web at getirshelp.com, because the one sure thing is, IRS problems don't solve themselves. So get Mish. 888-438-6474. Principal Office, Tampa.
Welcome back to the IRS Solution Attorney Show. I'm your host, Darrin T. Mish, the IRS Solution Attorney.
And I'm your co-host, Katrina Madewell. And we had a caller, which was Lee. I'm not sure if he was wanting to answer the question or if he actually had a question.
It was a she.
Oh, she, Lee. All right, Miss Lee, if you would like to call us back. Pat, did she say if she had a question or was she responding to Darrin's question?
Well, she had a tax question.
Okay.
Fabulous.
In reference to political, I wasn't sure, but she had a tax question.
All right, Lee, if you want to call us back, we're 888-404-1010.
We're just trying to stir up the pot today. We know that this election is acrimonious, to say the least, and just trying to get some engagement here from our
So we
listeners.
were talking before the break, and you said, and that's what you said before we took the break, was, I don't know anybody that willingly pays more taxes. And I can give you an example.
Okay, great. Let's hear it.
So if someone's in the process of buying a property and they're self-employed, they might want to make those tax returns look beautiful and not write off so much stuff for at least a couple years. How's that?
Interesting note.
You love that answer, don't you?
Interesting note. I don't know anybody who would have done that.
Yeah, not you.
But do you know that it's just as bad in the eyes of the IRS to file a return that's inaccurate, that overstates your income, as it is to understate your income, or overstate your tax burden versus understate your tax burden?
I don't see it like that. I see it like I'm just not taking all of my possible deductions, which I'm allowed to do and I'm choosing not to.
Now, interestingly enough, there is an address at the IRS where if you decide that you just want to donate some money to the IRS, you can send a check there.
You're kidding me.
I am not kidding. There is a place to do that. So for all these people who say, tax rates are too low and we should pay higher taxes,
money there?
Then there's a place that you can Google to find out where to send it. You can send your money to the IRS.
Oh, we're going to have to look
there.
this up. Definitely after the break. All right, we have Lee. Oh, we had Lee back. She's gone again. All right, Lee, we keep trying to grab you and you keep hanging up. I didn't touch anything bad. I didn't do it.
All right.
I was literally getting ready to mute my microphone so you didn't hear me shuffling around so I could grab her. So, Lee, I don't know if you're like on the Howard Franklin or something and your call keeps dropping, but call us back.
Maybe she's on the East Coast and maybe the power to the cell towers is already cutting in and out.
I don't know. I have some friends in Miami and they were saying that people were already like going crazy. There's no gas, all that fun stuff that happens every storm.
We only do that now in Florida. We used to do it when there was a tropical storm coming, remember? You'd go to the store and there'd be no bread or water. And then after we got more and more false alarms, then it was like, And now I think it's kind of a good news that the stores down there and the gas stations are out of gas, because it's category 4. I mean, this is a big deal. This is not.
I think it was downgraded to a 3. Did it go back up to a 4?
Well, they're forecasting it's going to come ashore as a 4, and it's just going to brush the entire east coast of Florida from Broward, right, all the way to
the next couple
Jacksonville.
Days it will not look the same the way it looks today. And as far as Jacksonville, a lot of those folks evacuating, they're saying they couldn't find hotel rooms to the west. They had to go as far as Dothan, Alabama, to find hotel rooms.
Not that there's anything wrong with Dothan, Alabama. I've been there. I've stayed there. It's actually a pretty nice place.
So I guess the moral of the story is go to the beach, right? If you want to go to the beach, enjoy the weather today.
Well, I did notice a lot more traffic this morning coming to work.
More?
Yeah, a lot coming south on the interstate. Normally, you see 20 cars behind you. It looked like probably 7 a.m. at 5 a.m. this morning, and it looked like a lot of folks were headed west, headed
southwest.
over the bridge, headed over the bridge.
Maybe it's Orlando folks coming over to the beaches,
Sure.
the best beaches in Florida, in my
Make
opinion.
it a long weekend.
Unless they're surfing, in which case they're probably hanging out on the East Coast.
Well, yeah, I don't know.
It's going to be bad when they start closing down Universal and Disney probably today.
That's what they said. They might close Disney. It doesn't happen very often.
Not often.
It happened back in 2004 for Charlie. Remember when Charlie went right over Orlando? We evacuated from here in Tampa, and we ended up over in Titusville, actually, and just in the right spot for the storm to run right over.
That was the year we had the back-to-back storms.
4 in a row.
And all I know is one of the trees fell in my neighborhood and snapped the power line, and the transformer blew. We didn't have power for a week.
Ugh.
1 week. It was a long week.
And it's always hot right after the hurricane.
And there's
It's
no
always hot.
hotels. There's no hotels anywhere.
Nope. Your only choice is gut it out or go on vacation somewhere else.
Well, we eventually bought a generator when we could later get one, which was a very long time. And, we probably would just stay in the camper.
There's the Disney Magic right now that was supposed to return today to Cape Canaveral. And they said, nope, it's going to stay out at sea. So whoever has that cruise
That's
right now
fabulous.
stays out there 2 extra days.
I would love that. You're not paying for on Disney. Do you know how much money that's worth?
It's probably down in the Yucatan somewhere down around Mexico and just enjoying it, pull into a dock and you stay on the island longer.
I mean, that is fabulous.
I bet you there's-
we've taken Disney. They're expensive.
I bet you there's about 25 to 30% of the people that are not happy with that decision, though, because they have to go to, they have childcare, or they have, they have work to go to, or they have other obligations.
Darrin, you are not a cruiser.
I am a cruiser. I've been
When's
on
the
a lot
last
of.
time you went on a cruise?
Well, it's been several years, but
Yeah. Pat, you're a cruiser.
I am a big cruiser.
And you tell me, would you be upset about spending an extra 2 days in some port on a Disney cruise?
Absolutely not.
Dude, you'd be like, Charlie, you'd be sending him an email from the little port room. Sorry, no phone access, but I'm stuck.
It's not my fault.
Hurricane
I wanted
Matthew.
to come home.
I don't know if Pat's liver could handle an extra 2 days on the cruise.
Hey, speaking of that, I ran into some friends that lost some weight on this. There's all these diets that they have now that doctors are helping you with, and I'll get back to that. Let me get Lee.
Okay, that's probably Lee. We've missed her, so we've been waiting for you, Lee.
As you can tell, we're talking about the weather again.
And the question was, you don't know anybody that has willingly just paid more taxes.
Yeah, and I'm
Was
not
it the
talking
question?
about they're trying to make their income look good so they can get a loan. That's
Hey, good morning,
doesn't
Lee.
hardly
How
count.
are you? Before we lose her again, push that button.
Hey, Lee.
Hey, how are you?
We're doing well. How are you?
Oh my gosh, I don't know what's going on with these towers. I have a quick question. Let me ask it fast. It's not about Trump, and I'm all for him. But I've heard so many things about short sales with houses. I know that they were giving everybody a 1040, and you have to pay it back. A bank told me that they think that they've changed the laws now, and it's different.
I'm gonna punt this over to Katrina. Let her try and goof it up, and then
That's
I'll,
a Katrina
I'll fix her.
question. No, that is not entirely true. They have been, and they have to renew the bill every year. Was it your homestead property, your primary residence?
Yes.
Okay. So you should not, you may get a 1099, and Darrin will chime in on the tax side of this, but they have renewed that bill every year that because of the short sale market and the way it was, this has been in effect for a while. I don't know if we'll be here next year, but it's been in place for the last several years that you don't have that. And before that, there's the 982C if you had a hardship. But
Yeah, there's 2 exceptions. There's the primary residence exception, and then there's the insolvency exception. And most people who go through a short sale do it because they're insolvent, right? And you don't typically let your house go because you're flush with cash. Some people do.
You weren't a
but-
strategic default, were you, Lee?
No. My situation is a little different. I am not in default. I'm current with all my payments. I'm getting ready to retire, and once I retire, I'm upside down in the house, and I make a decent salary to where I don't know if you claim a hardship. I make over $120,000 a year. So how in the heck do I get out of this house that's worth $40,000 or $30,000 less than what I owe?
Will your income change after you retire?
After I retire, yes.
Okay. So, I mean, that right there is enough to create a hardship to likely, have the bank look at a short sale. The other thing, too, that people don't talk about a lot, Darrin, is, if you're upside down on your home and you want to sell, there's nothing that says that you can't sell. But what happens is you usually have to work out some terms with the bank to repay that difference after you sell. And some people might elect to do that as opposed to, when you go through the short sale process, some banks won't even talk about it or consider you for a short sale until you're behind on your payment, which I think is so goofy.
Right.
I've never understood why they encourage that.
I've heard that they want you to be behind 3 months.
And,
Some
and
of them.
if you miss 3 payments, you're in foreclosure. So then you're in big trouble.
Right.
Well, it's the beginning stage. Like you're technically in a hard default where they can file the list pendants, which is the first stage in the foreclosure process. I would try to work out some type of repayment plan with them. Who's your lender?
I'm going to lose you. I'm going to hang up. Maybe you can answer it.
All right. Who's your lender? Do you know? We lost her. Okay. So depending on who that lender is, if it's a credit union, they'll absolutely work out a repayment plan with you. If it's a big bank, like I don't even like saying their name, but we just refer to them as Bank of God because they think they are. It's way more difficult to get anything done in that process just because the right hand doesn't talk to the left, and it's hard enough to get through a regular short sale process using their equator system.
Sounds kind of like a certain governmental agency that we talk about quite a bit once a week.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, I think that the big banks and the government are kind of melted together almost nowadays, with too big to fail and all that. Bank of God could be any one of like 4 or 5 banks.
Yes,
right?
It could be, but I think we know who I'm inferencing.
I think I know who you're talking about. I'll ask you at the break.
Lee, if you want to call my office, Echo is standing by. The number is 813-936-2302. We'll be happy to answer some questions for you and dive in a little bit deeper when the cell phone signal is not wonky. Again, that's 813-936-2302. And this is the IRS Solution Attorney Show, and you can reach Darrin at 888-GET-MISH. It is. Hey, every once in a while, someone has a real estate question, and we answer it. So
It's
don't
good
act
to talk
like
out of the box.
Don't act like I wouldn't call you up if it was Friday. Come on now. All right, we'll be back in a minute. Got a question or a comment? Call in 888-404-1010. We'll be back in a minute.
Welcome back to the IRS Solution Attorney Show, or the Katrina Answers Real Estate Questions Show.
That too. Yep, we can do that.
I'm your host. Still, I think, the IRS Solution Attorney, Darrin T. Mish.
So we are going to talk about IRS stuff. I promise. I'm your co-host, Katrina Madewell, which you probably heard me on Tampa Home Talk on Friday. So we'll have to squeeze a little IRS stuff in there on a Friday.
So let's talk a little bit about what we're supposed to be talking about today. And I'm the biggest offender and the biggest problem here today.
We've been having fun.
What do you do if you forgot to file a tax return? So there's probably people out there. There's probably about, 70% of the people driving around listening to us, and they're thinking, well, who in the world would forget to file a tax return, right?
It's April 15th? What?
Right. I mean, don't you think that that's kind of your typical consumer response would be, who in the world would forget to file their tax return? Aren't they going to get a refund, right?
I mean, it's not something that most people forget, considering that's what everybody talks about on April 15th.
But my people, the people I love so much who come to me and let me, fix their tax problems, they tend to be, self-employed type folks, typically, or people who made early withdrawals on 401ks or IRAs or things like that, who are going to owe money. And sometimes it just slips their mind when April 15th comes to either file an extension, or if they do file an extension till October 15th, sometimes it just slips their mind to file a tax return. And then when nothing happens over a period of months,
it's all good.
Sometimes it slips their mind to file the next year, and then the next year.
That's how the trend starts?
The next year. That's exactly what happens. Is because the IRS is really slow on the trigger, then not much happens.
What makes them finally pull the trigger anyway?
The IRS?
Yeah. Because sometimes it could be a couple years, 2-3 years, and sometimes it's many, many, many years, right?
Yeah, so let's talk about what happens if the IRS, if the taxpayer doesn't file a return, and what the two possibilities. There's really kind of 3 possibilities, but the first is the IRS can prepare what's called a substitute for return. So a substitute for return is exactly what it sounds like. It's something that the IRS prepares, allegedly for the taxpayer. What they do is they add
they prepare it for them, all right.
They add up all of the income from whatever source, from the W-2s and 1099s and whatnot. And then they just multiply it by the tax rate, and then they assess interest and penalties, and they're off to the races. Now, there are some procedural things they have to do. They have to send you a notice, certified mail to your last known address and things like that. But in Florida in particular, we're such a transient population that if you haven't filed a tax return for, 9 years, right? What are the odds that you live at the apartment that you lived at in, 1994 or whatever? And so lots of times people don't get those notices, and then a substitute for return, balance is assessed. And
which they don't send a notice for, right? If they do the substitute for return, they don't mail that to you, right?
Yeah, actually they do. They're supposed to send you what's called a notice of deficiency to your last known address via certified mail. And then the taxpayer has a right within 90 days to file a tax court petition. Now that's the hard way to fight a substitute for return, is to file a tax court petition and kind of hash it out in court. The other way to deal with a substitute for return is to just file an original return. After, if the IRS prepares a substitute for return, let's say for tax year, 2010, and if you finally can get around to it and file an original return for 2010 that reflects less tax, 99 times out of 100, the IRS is going to accept your original return and move forward like that.
So it just supersedes whatever they filed?
Yeah, you can file an original return subsequent to that substitute for return. That's
and
a mouthful.
You used 2010. Isn't this 2016? Didn't you say you only have to go 5 years back?
Well, you have to go 6 years back.
Oh, so that's why you use 2010.
Yeah, so it would be 2010. So what happens in my practice quite a bit, in just about every day, is someone comes in to the office and they haven't filed a tax return in 10 plus years, and they're scared and they're nervous and they don't know what to do, and they come and ask for help.
A better question would be, where the heck do they start? Because they're probably thinking, what usually triggers that? Is it a 401k withdrawal a lot of the time?
So what
usually triggers that whole
failure to file?
I'm not going to file this year. Whoops, it's another year. Whoops, another year. Whoops, another year. What triggers that first year usually?
Every once in a while we do entire shows where we just talk about the mental and emotional, aspects. Honestly, what triggers it is fear. It's fear of...
No, that wasn't the question.
No, I know, but let me elaborate. It's fear of the balance due that they in quotes, they know is coming. And so because they think they're going to owe a bunch of money and they don't have the money to pay, they just put it on the back burner, and they think to themselves, well, I'll deal with this later because later will be a better time. And maybe that's true. Maybe that is true, that later is a better time. But, we have this obligation to file and pay our taxes. So if the IRS decides to... it's not common at all, but if the IRS really has two options, they could do the substitute for return, or they can just criminally prosecute you for the crime of failure to file.
Yeah, but we talk about that all the time. That
it's very, very
never
rare.
happens.
It's very, very rare because the number of people who are non-filers is roughly, the estimates are 10% of the population.
Wow, 10% of people don't file a return?
Which is a huge number. So when I hear about part of why I brought up the Donald Trump thing, was when I hear, knowing what I know and doing what I do every day, when I hear this sort of false outrage that this billionaire isn't paying taxes, I think, man, if you people knew of the sheer number of people who walk among you who don't bother to file their taxes and pay their taxes, I think you'd be appalled. But see, does it really matter, to that kind of person that, Joe the carpenter is driving around not paying taxes? No, it's just because Trump's a billionaire and he allegedly should be paying lots of taxes. I don't think billionaires pay taxes, personally.
Well, it's not like you have a label that says, oh, by the way, I didn't pay my taxes.
True.
That's a personal thing that most people just wouldn't know.
True. And I hang around with lots of small business owners and entrepreneurs, in my professional circle, because those are the type of people that I like, because I consider myself one of those people. And it never fails to shock me how many of my very successful friends will later come and contact me privately and say, hey, Darrin, I got this tax problem I need to get fixed. As a matter of fact, I'm on the computer here in the studio on Facebook, and I got a Facebook message during the show from an entrepreneurial friend who just said, hey, what's your phone number? I need to come in and talk
help.
to you. Yeah, exactly. and even he expressed some shame about, hey, I really screwed this up and I really need help. Hey, I respect that tons. There comes a time when you have certain types of problems in your life. Mine would be plumbing. Okay, if I had a plumbing problem in my house, I'm not trying to fix it. I don't know how to do that, and I do not want to. So it's the same thing when you have a tax problem. Is you should probably go and seek out some help from someone who's been there and done that, maybe 1,000 times.
So did you tell your friend that your number is 888-GET-MISH? Or he can find you on Twitter at Darrin_Mish.
Well, actually, I tried to save the toll-free cost. I told him my phone number is 813-229-7100. So if you want to call me on that number, that works too.
Oh, for our local people.
It's 813-229-7100 or 888-438-6474.
So you should have got a number that ended in like 1040 or something. That would have been really cool. Did you try to do that? You didn't think about that.
When I opened my practice, I actually did not represent people with tax problems. And so I did not have the presence of mind to do that because I couldn't read the tea leaves.
Criminal defense attorney.
Yeah, that's my background as a criminal defense attorney going way back. But I feel like that skill set of defending people against the government when they have real serious problems really came in handy when I started representing people with tax problems, because I understand procedural maneuvers and planning and strategy and that kind of thing.
And the cool part is, like, I know just from hanging around with you for the last several years and doing the show and just knowing you on a personal level, that your friend that's asking for help, it probably took them a lot of courage to muster up like the to actually send you that message, because they're afraid that you're going to judge him or her. And I know you enough to know that that would never be the case.
No, not only am I not going to judge him, I would like to collaborate with him so that we can figure out so that he can pay the least amount of tax possible under the law, right? And we're not going to break the law, and we're not going to do anything illegal, immoral, or unethical, but we can use the law to try to attempt to make sure that he pays the least amount that he can get away with, which is what it sounds like these couple politicians who are running for president are doing.
So what do you think, Pat? I would think that maybe if somebody like me or Pat knows you, of course we'd want your help, but it would be bittersweet, the fact that we knew you, but that we're like, oh, we got to tell him we got a tax problem.
Well, he's heard and seen it all, so that's not a big deal. I'd be willing to tell him everything because you know he's going to save you. He's going to help you. And
if I had a tax problem, he would throw me under the bus. He'd be like, oh, yeah, we're so talking about that on air. You're going to share every detail. Like, he would just throw me right under there.
I don't believe that.
I think he would.
Because
he knows I would do it.
If you gave me permission, I would throw you under the bus. If you didn't give me permission, no one would ever hear a word about it.
I know, but you'd want to talk about that.
Well, heck,
you would not let me live that down.
I would just start talking about the hypothetical real estate agent that I know who has this giant problem. Although I have actually I've easily represented dozens of agents over the years, which is why I can, speak so freely about how
I know some agents that do a lot of business and have not filed returns. I don't even know how long, and I'm just like, hey. Darrin's number is 888-GET-MISH. You might want to call him sometime.
So let's talk about...
It's probably easier to deal with it before than when you actually get contacted by the IRS, right?
Yeah, if I had my choice of a taxpayer who was a non-filer who has had no contact from the IRS versus a taxpayer who's a non-filer who now has a revenue officer assigned to the case who's breathing down their neck, I would pick the first option every day and twice on Sunday because we have more time, we have less of a stressed out client, and we have time to do it right so that, we're not under the gun. Versus when you have a revenue officer who's handling the case, I mean, it is their job to get the money.
And they're ready to close that sucker out and move on.
So they're gonna start to apply pressure. They're gonna give you some, semi-reasonable deadlines and, to get your stuff done. But I think the hardest part about the practice is honestly not what needs to be done. It's not developing the strategy or the game plan of how we're going to resolve the matter. It's clients, and I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just clients because first of all, they're not used to having records and providing records and things like that, but they're also scared. And scared people act weird.
They freeze sometimes.
Yeah. Either they do one of two things, or three things. They either fight us, or they run, or they hide. Right? So I mean, those are the three options. I don't like either one of those. Any of those options.
You've left them 15 messages. Nobody's calling you back. So they're hiding under their paperwork. They don't want to provide it.
So really, that's the hardest part about dealing with people with tax problems is just that there's this anxiety and fear and stuff wrapped up. Like Pat said, it's the most feared agency in the world. And so people get scared. And
you do get some psycho people. It's interesting because, I just came back from Accelerate at Dave Ramsey's office earlier this week. And same thing that he's like, yeah, we get some lunatics, unfortunately. Like, I don't know what it is, but.
Well, and there are some people who are, mentally ill or emotionally crippled or whatever. And that's the cause of the tax problem. It's not the other way around. So that happens. And you try to weed those folks out. Not that have a problem with those folks. It's just they're harder to represent.
So should we talk about one of your crazies that called when we come back? I think we should
When we
talk
call
about
back, we can talk about somebody who called me who was really offended about an article that I had written about Donald Trump and why Donald Trump might not be wanting to release his tax return.
And we actually got a question from Pat, a different Pat, not Pat George, but another Pat. And we're going to answer that question when we come back. If you have one too, we'll take yours as well. 888-404-1010. If you got a tax, IRS-ish, anything like that question, 888-404-1010. We'll be back in just a minute. Welcome back. You're listening to the IRS Solution Show for real, for really real.
IRS Solution Attorney. See, she's trying to discount my involvement in my own radio show.
It's not intentional at all, at all.
Just comes naturally.
I'm your co-host, Katrina Maidwell. I'm happy to be here for real.
So let's get to that question.
All right. So the question is, the question disappeared. Hold on. I got it right here. All right. So Pat wants to know, and this is not Pat George, by the way, but it's a different Pat that's listening to the show, which you can catch up with Darrin at Darrin_Mish if you're a tweeter. And he's also on Facebook. Is it the IRS Solution Attorney?
It is.
Okay. And he'll answer your questions there too. And we will likely bring them to the air as well. So Pat wants to know, my wife works full time and collects a W-2, and I own my own business. We filed our taxes jointly. Do I still need to pay my taxes quarterly? That's a great question.
Yeah, it is a good question. It's a little bit of a loaded question. The answer is, if you have a tax liability attributable to the self-employment income, your business income, at the end of the year, then you are actually supposed to be paying your estimated tax payments quarterly. If you had no, tax liability, tax liability from the business, so for example, maybe there was enough withholding from the W-2 earnings, then you would not have to pay your your estimated tax payments quarterly. The one thing that he said was, he says, do I still need to pay my taxes quarterly? There's a little hint would be pay your estimated tax payments more frequently than quarterly if they're substantial payments. So make them monthly. You can make them daily if you really want to. And the IRS has a pretty cool direct pay system.
Unless you're duplicate, they don't like that. Unless it's the same amount, they think it's weird. They think it's an accident.
Yeah, I don't know if I would pay $100 twice in one day, but the IRS has a pretty good direct pay system that's online nowadays. It does work. It works really well. I've used it for myself and for clients. It's called IRS Direct Pay. Just Google it.
I thought it was EFTPS.
No, EFTPS is for typically for payroll deposits and that kind of thing. Direct pay is to pay your estimated tax payments or pay your 1040 balances and that kind of thing. So I recommend that people do it because it's a lot faster than a check.
Gotcha. So we were going to answer the question also for the topic of the show. If you forget to file, what should you actually do? And if we have time, Darrin, I'd like to get to this bank rate story that we have on our outline. It says that they're talking about the IRS says you should change your withholdings now. But if we have time, we'll get to that.
Okay. So what you should do if you're a non-filer is you should call somebody like me, and we can, interface with the IRS very discreetly, and we can get your transcripts so that we can help you prepare those returns and then develop a game plan before we file the returns so that the IRS collection machine doesn't start rolling and steamroll you. If for whatever reason you don't want to hire a professional, I respect that. There are ways that you can get your transcripts from the IRS. There are phone numbers that you can call to get your transcripts from the IRS. They will send them to you, usually through the mail. And then you can go to, you can either prepare the returns yourself or you can go to a tax preparer and they'll prepare them for you.
Isn't like a red flag, though, self-prepared returns?
No, not necessarily. No, there's still an awful lot of self-prepared returns out there, but you can prepare the returns and then you can file them and try and figure out, what you're going to do from there. It's important to note that sometimes non-filers have refunds coming. And it really breaks my heart because there's a refund statute of limitations. So in other words, if you file a refund return more than 3 years old, then you don't get the refund and you don't even get the credit for the refund. So I just saw that in my office yesterday. There was about a $900 refund that he's not going to get because he didn't get around to getting the returns prepared.
If you're a W-2 person, don't wait. Call Darrin, 888-GET-MISH. That is painful. Do not give the government any extra money at all. All right. Can you touch on this real quick about why Bankrate says this year you should change your withholding?
Okay, so the IRS is actually saying that you should change your withholding at this point of the year if you can. And the reason is they're saying that they're going to be delaying some refunds this year until at least mid-February. So if you're the type of person who gets an earned income tax credit, typically a lower income person, and you expect a big refund, they're basically saying that Those are going to be delayed this year. I think they've been delayed a few years in a row
Because of withholdings?
it's because they're doing more and more investigation to make sure that they're good returns, because there's more and more fraud occurring. So the IRS is basically just saying that they want you to adjust your payroll withholding now, so that if you have, you can diminish the size of that refund so you can get more of your check now, basically.
Gotcha. Right on time for the train wreck of the week.
So it's about that time. This is the segment of the show where we talk about where somebody came into the office and they were essentially a train wreck because they had a problem with the IRS. And then we talk about what the problem was and then how we solved it. And almost always they leave living happily ever after.
Can't please everybody, Darrin.
So this is one of my favorite stories, actually. There was a gentleman that came into my office several years ago. He was an older guy. He must have been around 60 years old. Not that that's old. I'm not saying that. But he was older than me at the time. I was probably 30. And he sat down, and he was way more nervous than typical. So lots of people come into the office, and they're nervous because they're in a lawyer's office, and lawyers are scary, and they have
You're
this
all
problem, and they think we're all crooks and stuff. And
just the stereotypical.
one of the reasons why I haven't gone into politics, because that would just solidify the whole deal, right? So he's way more nervous than average. I mean, I know what acceptable nervous is. It's like me going to the doctor, right? I'm not usually like, hey, dude. I'm usually a little nervous because I don't want to hear the bad news.
You're going to get a shot.
So, but this guy is trembling. I mean, and he can barely speak. And so I'm a pretty nice guy, especially in that context. So I'm like, well, tell me what's wrong, because there's obviously something wrong. So tell me what the story is. He says, well, I haven't filed tax returns in a while. I'm like, okay. And what's going through my head is, look, this is the story of my life. That's really not that big a deal.
There's never a real number. It's always a while.
So I said, okay, well, lots of people, probably most people that come in are non-filers. So I know what to expect. It's fine. And he says, no, a while. I said, okay, well, all right, just tell me, how long is a while? He says, a long time.
In that context, I would think 20 years.
He says, a long time. I said, all right, so just, cut to the chase. And he says, well, I was in the Army. The Army screwed up my Social Security number. After they screwed up the Social Security number, I didn't know which Social Security number was right, so I just never filed. I said, okay, so what year was that? He said, 1960. So I get a big smile on my face. I'm like excited, right? Because that's cool. Not cool because he's not paying taxes. It's just cool because it's a big problem and I know how to solve it.
Give him some good news.
Exactly. So I shared with him that I was born in 1967 and that I thought it was pretty darn cool that I was going to fix a problem that's been, in existence since before my existence. So what we did is we ended up filing the last 6 years of returns. He owed very little. He ended up paying that off, and he got his life back. He basically let that fear ruin the most productive years of his earning life.
Oh,
because he could not face that fear, that anxiety about not knowing what to do.
What are you adding? Rain? It's not raining yet, Pat. Save that for tomorrow. All right, you can get Darrin at 888-GET-MISH. You can also reach him at Twitter, Darrin_Mish.
Don't forget the website at getirshelp.com. And for now, I think we're blown out.
Yep, don't miss Mason Dixon and Charlie Oaks in an hour. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.